Hello, you are listening to KPMG's Energy Exchange podcast, a podcast where we explore the path to Ireland's exciting energy future. We discuss the practical things that we can do to unlock the full potential of Ireland as a major energy producer. I'm Colm O'Neill, and today I'm joined by Catherine Sheridan. Catherine is Technical Director for Sustainability and the Circular Economy with Enviroguide, an Irish company, recently acquired by DNV, a Norwegian company, who are helping their clients to safeguard life, property and the environment. She's also chair of the Cork Offshore Renewable Industry Forum. Catherine is a chartered engineer and a fellow of Engineers Ireland, and in her spare time, she has taken on the challenge of doing an MBA with UCC. So Catherine, you're very welcome. And thank you for coming into us today. Maybe to get us started, you might just give us a pen picture of you, your career, and also tell us a little bit about Enviroguide and what they do as an organisation.
That's brilliant, Colm. Thanks so much for having me in to talk about this incredible topic. We're at this wonderful time in Ireland where we know how bad things are, and we still have time to do something about it. And that agency that it gives us is just incredible. So I'm extremely values driven, and the two biggest ones, I suppose, are to do interesting work that has a societal benefit. And that comes back from where I went to secondary school in Middleton. I went to St. Mary's, and they taught us that what we did mattered and we could make a difference. And I think that it's ironic that the sector that I've ended up in, being so typically male dominated, was inspired from a convent education in an all-girls school in East Cork in the 80s and 90s. So I'm an engineer by training, and all I've ever wanted to do was to protect the environment and the world we live in. So in school, that was being in part of the eco group. And then I worked very much in water and wastewater. And then circa 2017, I was lucky enough, I was working in the multi-utility company at the time, Ervia, which was Gas Networks Ireland and Irish Water. And I was able to switch from one into the other and really focus on what the opportunity was there for Ireland to transition from the energy system of the time to the energy system of the future, which is really looking at the trilemma between sustainability, affordability and security of supply. And I looked around the place and I felt there were so many fabulous people working in the electricity sector. So I sort of thought, where could I apply myself to make a difference? And I really felt that decarbonising the energy system and finding a solution for the things that you can't plug in, that could be where I could have my space. So at the moment I'm working with Enviroguide, which is a DNV company, and Enviroguide is a multidisciplinary group, and what we do is we are really embedded in the here and now, so offering services like environmental impact assessments or hydrology or different ways of considering how building the things that matter can be done in a way that's sympathetic to nature and the environment and sustainability. So I'm also working in sustainability because I feel that if we can help create long-term shareholder value by embedding sustainability in our decisions, then we're starting to make this wider than a moral question and into an economic question. So recently the World Economic Forum listed the 10 top risks that are facing business. And the top 4 are actually relating to climate. So this isn't something we need to do because of the polar bears. It's something that we need to do for hard-nosed business reasons. This is reflected in government's approach. Government have come out with a white paper on sustainability and offshore energy to understand how can we progress this opportunity for the country in an economic way. So it will be a way of changing the economy and society for the better.
So couple of points to pick up on there. First of all, you went to school in Middleton and you still live in Middleton.
I do.
So you haven't drifted too far physically from where you grew up?
You know, I had an opportunity to go to college in Galway primarily because I knew I'd end up back in Cork. You know, so I was lucky enough to, you know, have a fantastic education. And I live in Middleton with, you know, very close to my family, across the road from my parents. My husband is a New Zealander, so I feel like that was my, you know, contribution to broadening the gene pool. I have twin sons, Oscar and Noah. They're 17. And we just have this connection to nature and to sport and to all the things about Ireland that make it fantastic. For example, the multiculturalism that we experience in sport. 2 of our family sports are taekwondo and cricket. So we get all of these different nationalities coming together and understanding how things work. And it makes us realise how small the world is and how our actions matter at a local level.
Yeah.
And then you start translating that into the environment and sustainability. And you start making your decisions about what happens in Cork and Middleton, what happens in Ireland, what role can Ireland play for Europe and the world.
And so like you've kind of maintain that kind of ecosystem that you've come from, but having an impact on a global scale.
Yeah, it's how we do everything, or how we do anything is how we do everything.
Yeah.
You know, so I think if you can start having those sustainable values in your own life, then it becomes very obvious and natural and authentic to carry them on into your career. And it's a fantastic way to live my life anyways.
And then if we pick that point as well that you were making about the it being an economic argument as opposed to just a kind of a climate or a sustainability argument. Like, you're clearly very passionate and purposeful about the sustainability agenda, and we have a climate action plan. I sometimes wonder whether the climate action plan and the action that we're looking for people to take being rooted in climate alienates some people, when an argument of independence or an argument of economic prosperity might be a more powerful argument. What's your thoughts on that?
I think that in the first instance, I agree with you. I think sometimes you got to know your audience and you've got to understand how people feel. And depending on how somebody feels, we must believe them. So if somebody is struggling because of lack of housing, or they're struggling because they can't get a school place for their child, these are more economic questions. So that's in the public sense, and in gaining social license for the infrastructure that we need to ensure that we're taking a caring approach and we're understanding what that means for people.
Yeah.
But then flip it into a boardroom. If you've got a boardroom and you've got people who have invested and they're looking for their returns, you've got to change your language in relation to that. And you've got to understand, how can we make sure that this company is not damaging the climate, that the climate is not going to have a negative impact on this company, so that we can ensure its longevity for decades and centuries to come.
Yeah, and that is increasingly becoming an issue for investors, looking at companies, their ability to be sustainable in either through climate impact or through their kind of impact on society. So it's a really, really great intro. Thank you for that. And maybe if we dive into a specific area that I know you're passionate about. We've certainly talked on this podcast previously about gas, and we would have referred to hydrogen of all its different hues. And we haven't done green hydrogen specifically. And I know you, having written a paper, Green Hydrogen in Ireland, it's something that you're very knowledgeable on and have strong opinions on. So could you maybe give us your thoughts on green hydrogen and its role in Ireland's energy future?
Absolutely. So what's meant by green hydrogen is that when electricity generated from renewable sources is used to separate the H2O, the hydrogen, from the oxygen and water, it becomes hydrogen, which can be used as an energy vector, as a molecule. The energy system we have today in Ireland, 80% of the energy that we have in Ireland comes from fossil fuels, and actually 80% of it is imported. So we have an energy system of today that really relies on molecules. They happen to be the likes of coal and gas and oil. But if we fast forward into the future, and if we electrify as much as possible, and we make as much renewables connected to the grid, and we build out the grid, and we save as much energy as we can, we're still going to probably need about 50% of our energy needs to be met through molecules. So for me, as I mentioned earlier, there's loads of fantastic people working in the electricity sector, but we need to think about, how do we solve the whole problem? An annoying joke that triathletes make is, how do you know there's a triathlete in the room? Don't worry, they'll tell you. And the reason I say that is, there's 3 sports. There's swimming, there's cycling, and there's running. At the moment, if we were to only focus on electricity, that would be like just learning to swim. And then when we get out of the water and we look at a bike, we're saying, I don't know what that is. So if we want to get to a fully decarbonised energy system and to really capitalise on the economic opportunity that Ireland has, we need to look at decarbonising molecules in parallel with decarbonising electricity.
There's lots of options for that, though, isn't there? Like there's biomethane and so on and so forth. So there's lots of ways that can be generated. Why green hydrogen as the...
So love biomethane. I think it's amazing. If we're going to get a good energy transition in Ireland, we need to bring everybody with us. Biomethane is amazing because it's a like-for-like substitute within the gas pipe. You can do inject it, you can transport it by trucks, you can have small companies, you can have large companies. It's really going to be part of our mix. And that's the key. It's going to be part of our mix. We're going to have natural gas being displaced by biomethane. We're going to be repurposing that €2.8 billion asset that is ours as citizens. What else could we use it for? Well, we have an abundance of wind. In fact, in Ireland, if we were to capture our offshore wind and onshore wind and solar renewables, we could have more energy than we know what to do with. But it's really hard to transport energy in electrical form.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to store it as well. So in that instance, you're starting to look for other options for your energy. So you can convert it into hydrogen. You can convert it into hydrogen, use it for long-term storage, and ESB are looking at that very strongly. It allows you to convert it back into electricity for when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing. Also, it becomes an opportunity for us to go up the value chain in the energy transition. So instead of just exporting electricity or exporting green hydrogen, what we could start looking at is there an opportunity maybe for us to invest in sustainable aviation fuels? Could we start having energy hubs? Could we start, for example, displacing some of the imports that we have? So the world is really growing. We need to make sure that we can feed the world. We need ammonia. At the moment, ammonia, NH3, comes from natural gas, CH4.
Yeah.
But in the future, that wind could create hydrogen, which we could be using to fertilize our soil without transporting that ammonia from other countries to Ireland.
Yeah. So I guess there's some specific benefits to hydrogen in terms of solving some of those more intractable renewables problems, like lifting heavy things and heating up things to high temperatures. But also, I think one of the points you're alluding to there, that within the Irish energy system, given the fact that we will likely have a surplus of wind energy, it's possibly the most viable solution for both storing and transporting that surplus energy that we create.
Yeah, I think we've got to change the boundary condition that we impose on ourselves as a country. So instead of considering the pace at which we can build out infrastructure as the limiting factor for our ambition, we need to start thinking about what resources are available to us. How can we support future generations by the amount of renewable energy we have, and use that as the starting point? So in that instance, you're looking at who in Europe, for example, needs this wind in the form of hydrogen.
Yeah.
Steel is blowing my mind at the moment. At the moment, for every person on the planet, there's 250 kilograms of steel being produced every year.
Yeah.
And that relies at the moment on fossil fuels. Ireland's wind could be exported in the form of hydrogen to Germany, who cannot make enough hydrogen themselves. That's a really long-term play. And in that paper that I wrote on green hydrogen and opportunities between Ireland and Germany, I spoke about the idea of novel incentives at government level for offtake agreements, where a German steel company, for example, could enter into an agreement with Ireland, and then Ireland could auction the rights to enter into that contract so that there is a demand. The old chicken and egg situation. Yeah. Why would we produce all this hydrogen if nobody needed it? Why would anybody commit to buying to us if it didn't exist?
Yeah, so you're producing an option for them to purchase the surplus energy. And I also thought, I'm sure you've had a look at it yourself, but the offshore wind industrial strategy that was created, I think that's really encouraging to see at a government level, us having that vision that is a prosperity vision for the energy transition as opposed to purely a kind of a climate ambition.
Absolutely. There's a number of elements in that I really like, and it builds on this idea of the economic viewpoint in relation to our resource. I remember in school, in geography, we were told that we didn't have any exports, we didn't have any materials that we could make any natural resources, you know. Now we have an incredible one. Yeah. Now we have
wind.
Recognized that we have it. It's been there all along, but now we've recognized we have it. So it changes our conversation as long as we start thinking of it in the idea of how much we have. But what I would say is it's a combination of zooming right out and understanding from a systems viewpoint, how do we solve the whole problem and how do we get to 2050? And then you got to zoom right in with laser focus and say, what's the next thing we need to do?
Yeah.
You know?
And so we can't get off hydrogen without talking about some of the challenges associated with it. It's expensive, it's difficult, it's dangerous, to name just a few. What are your thoughts on that?
So it being expensive, dangerous, and what was the third one?
Difficult to produce.
Difficult to produce. It kind of sounds like you could be talking about fossil fuels. You know, like if I think about diesel, Muppets driving along, you know, and you see the people driving out of the garage and they've still got the hose in, you know, so energy is dangerous, you know, and I think that we are lucky that we live in a time that everything is so regulated. So we're managed to regulate dangerous forms of energy already. So we can do the same with hydrogen. In relation to its expensiveness, it's the idea of, moving into philosophy for a moment about the cost. The cost of something is the amount of life that we exchange for it.
Yeah. So
if we just talk about money as a proxy for value, then yeah, it's absolutely more expensive. You know, if you just wanted an energy system that was cheap, you'd continue to burn fossil fuels. But we don't. We want one that's cheap, well, affordable. We want one that's sustainable, so we need to have decarbonised energy systems. But we also want one that's secure. Green hydrogen gives Ireland an opportunity for an indigenous energy supply, one that we can produce here and that we can have as a reserve. But going beyond that, we live in difficult geopolitical times. And a lot of the linkages between energy supply and geopolitics are, you know, once you start scratching beneath the surface, you can see them. We also have this opportunity to make decisions now that are going to avoid future geopolitical instability and future forms of green colonialism, rather than rely on importing cheap sources of energy from countries that have a lot of solar and a lot of wind. If we produce it here in the EU, what we allow ourselves to do is develop at pace without taking the opportunity for those countries who are a little bit behind us in their timeline to do the same.
Yeah. So I guess what you're saying is it might have those attributes. Some can be overcome, and some are just worth the trade, which is you get to produce it yourself as opposed to having to rely on potentially unreliable partners. And
the other bit as well is it's that I can't remember what the name of the bias is, but in our thinking, we discount the cost and the dangers of the status quo versus the new. And I think sometimes if we were to put two energy systems on the table
beside each other,
then we'd be able to have a fair comparison.
Yeah. And maybe to create this green hydrogen future, we're going to have to build, hydrogen converters. We're going to have to build things that will store the hydrogen. We're going to have to build things that will transport it. Many of these things will be ones that will be disruptive for people and will be not nice to look at, or would you prefer not to look at them? Which is similar for the whole energy system, and it's a subject that fascinates me. Is getting support from communities to execute this energy transition. And I was listening to Shane Coleman on News Talk today, and they were talking about Bus Connects and how long that's taken to implement. And he had a great phrase, which I wrote it down. He said in Ireland, he was talking about Irish people in general, we're not willing to support the common good over self-interest. I thought it was a really good kind of summary of this kind of propensity to object to everything. How do we get through that?
So, I don't know. I think Irish people are really good. And I think that we're used to doing things in a way, and it's just remembering it. So this concept of a mehel, of people coming together and work together for the greater good and going from one place, one farm to the next farm to do it, and sharing equipment and sharing machinery and things like that. And it exists. We need to tap into it. So I'm thinking back to, just some of the events over the weekend, just in Cork. There was a car boot sale where people are going along, and that's the circular economy in action. Kids going back to school and sharing uniforms from their cousins or their neighbours. It's in our DNA. We see it a lot in things like upcycling projects, and we see it a lot in apps like Too Good To Go, where we're considering food waste and avoiding it. So it's happening there. Kids in school and green schools are doing it the whole time. And there's just this general understanding around it. So it's kind of connecting that in with the bigger picture and understanding how we do those things is actually how we do all the big things as well.
It's a bit of a dichotomy, though, isn't it? Because like what you've described there, the community, our ability to galvanise around things and make them happen is I think, unique in many respects around the world. But it seems also our ability to limit progress through objecting to things is also, I guess some of that is the legal system, but some of it is cultural, the kind of that necessity to protect your patch.
I agree with you. And I think part of the solution is going to be the just transition. So as we start to bring more people into the tent of the energy sector and of engineering, for example, we're going to start bringing in new types of jobs and new roles. We're going to bring in storytellers. We're going to bring social scientists. We're going to bring in artists. And we're going to be able to create stories and involve the hearts and minds rather than just the numbers. I don't know who was it that said no one was ever compelled to action by a spreadsheet, but stories, something that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up, something like that gives you that space to see things in a new light. Yeah,
which is a brilliant segue, Catherine, because obviously this is Energy Exchange podcast, but we're doing a series here which is women in energy, and you've kind of opened that door for lots of different types of thinking arriving in the industry and different skill sets required than we maybe required previously. You're pretty outspoken on women in the energy industry. You've talked about embracing the legacy titles of being a Bachelor of Engineering and Masters in Business, and even being an Ironman, which you've referred to with your triathlon exploits. How do you square that circle?
So I didn't realise at the time when I was making my career choices in school that it was unusual to want to be an engineer. I wanted to do the things I was interested in. That was the same that everybody else was doing. So, people who were interested in medicine were becoming a doctor. I was interested in numbers, so I wanted to do engineering in relation to it, and a great way to protect the environment as well while I was at it. So I've managed to have two parallel tracks and to hold two competing thoughts in my mind as I've been going along. One is that one where knowing that I was following the path that I wanted and I was very comfortable in it and I was as capable as others of succeeding in it, while also recognizing that I was unusual and that I was frequently the only woman in the room sort of thing. But at the same time, not trying to have too much attachment to either, just sort of saying, this is where we are, this is whatever somebody's journey has brought them to this point, and this is where my journey has brought me to this point. And just enjoying it, because we're all more alike than we are different. There's normally something that you can find in common with someone. You could be a parent, you could be a sports person, you could be a swimmer, and sometimes it's the thing that you have in common can unite you more than things you have separate from each other.
And so you're almost that ability to just accept things the way they are and then try and advance from there, as opposed to wasting any energy complaining about where...
Yeah, because it's like, if you assume positive intent, you have a much nicer life. Okay, sometimes people might actually be nasty and might actually have really strong negative opinions towards you, but that's on them. There's much more opportunities, and I would very much study the Stoics, and they say the only thing you have control over is your reasoned choice. So if somebody presents something to you, you can't choose how they feel, you can't choose anything about them, but you can choose how you respond. And you can sort of say, is that to do with them or is it to do with me? And most of the time, people are good, people are fun, everybody wants to get through their day, maybe get a cup of tea and a biscuit afterwards. That's mostly what we want.
Yeah. And like from your own personal journey, do you think there were moments or events that were kind of really important to you in you advancing your career the way you did?
I think I had a lot of opportunities along the way. I come from a long line of uppity women. I have fantastic grandmother, mother, sister, and we were always presented with identify a problem, define it, put the steps in place and overcome it. My mum in particular is incredible. You know, at the early age of her early 40s, after having 7 children, she went back to college, studied law and qualified as a solicitor. So when you're around that, you know, we all need 1 or 2 people that we can look up to and engage with. And for me, no better than my mum and my dad in relation to it.
And people talk about that so often, that role models are so important for women advancing their careers. And it sounds like you grew up in a household full of role models from that perspective.
Yeah, I think so. And I went to college in Galway. Of a class of, I think, 70 civil engineers, 4 of us were women in relation to it. But I don't think anybody remembered to tell us. We were all just 70 students and we all just got on together and we all just went to the labs and we all just did everything. And that kind of progresses. You know, it's like from the outside looking in, it seems strange, but when you're inside looking out, it doesn't. It's wonderful at the moment because there is about 12% of the employment workforce in traditional energy sectors would be women. But for the green sector, that's up at like 25%. And I'm just thinking of, you know, some of the women that I know in this sector. You know, if you think of Dr. Andrea Ahern from Catagen, working in sustainable aviation fuel. In SSE, you've got Niamh Gillen, an incredible scientist and professional. Thinking back to my time with Gas Networks, with Flora and with Eilish, you know, these are people that I can think of. Breed Holland, an analyst in Gas Networks. You know, they're these people that you're around and you're so busy talking about ideas, making progress, understanding what's the change you want to see in the world, that something as kind of boring as gender kind of falls to the wayside.
Falls to the wayside. And it's very interesting that you say that, because we did an event here a few months ago now where we were just, you know, for the women in our organisation, particularly the ones who had just arrived in, for graduates and so on, we were just talking about how you advance your career and how you develop your career. And we had different people from different stages in their career. And I was hosting the panel, and it only struck me, we had one of the people on our panel was literally just in the door. And people were describing some of the challenges that they'd had and so on. And I just asked her, I said, do these challenges sound like challenges that you would expect to have in the workplace? And she was actually quite taken aback by the fact that people would be talking this way, because she had none of those perceptions.
Yeah.
Her view of her own life and her career was unlimited and didn't perceive that was going to be an issue at all, which is
that's inspiring.
It's a great mindset.
Yeah, it really is
to have.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there'll be young women out there today, and they'll be making decisions around subjects that they might choose, courses that they might opt for, having CAO courses in, jobs that they might take. Now, in fairness, they're unlikely to be listening to this podcast, but if you could speak to maybe their parents and give them a word of advice around picking a career in the energy industry, what would you say to them?
I think I would never say to a child or a student, what career would you like or what you want to be when you grow up? I'd ask them what problem would they like to solve? What injustice would they like to face down? And then I think you'll get really interesting answers. Because the thing that makes somebody light up and that they're passionate about, that's where they're going to turn up to work every day, and it's not going to feel like an effort. That's the career I have. In Enviroguide and with the wider DNV company, I turn up and I get to work on the most incredible things. And, you know, I'm working from home sometimes and the kids are coming down saying, your dinner is on the table, you need to come down. I'm going, just want to finish this little bit of research. So if a student can find something that lights them up that much, and the great thing is there's so many of those options in the energy sector.
Yeah.
I mean, we need the graphic designers, we need the accountants, we need the actuaries, we need everybody in this sector. And I would say that if you choose a mix of subjects, but really focus on having some STEM, some science, technology, and engineering and maths.
Yeah.
It's like having a magic passport that will get you anywhere around the world, because like no matter where you are, gravity is the same if you're in New Zealand, if you're in Japan. I had a chance last year to visit an off-grid energy ranch in Hawaii because of being an engineer.
Yeah.
And that was the most incredible opportunity, because gravity works the same way in Hawaii as it does here in Ireland.
Yes, it does. Brilliant advice, I think. And so pick a purpose over
solve
a job,
the problem. Absolutely.
But keep those STEM subjects as a kind of keeps your options open.
Absolutely, and it supports everything, you know, because like even if you're going to do law, and I come from a family of lawyers, I was the black sheep of the family to do engineering. But what I find is the logic from engineering and the logic in contract law, it's quite similar, you know. So I think, you know, whereas you're thinking, I'd like to go down this route, the stem will still stand you.
Stand you, yeah. And so maybe if we return to kind of decarbonising our energy system and Ireland's exciting energy future, if you were to be able to fix or change one or two things, what would they be?
Okay, so I'm going to pick two, and my first is that I would change the boundary conditions that the government have on our energy system. So instead of saying how fast could we build out the electricity grid to connect to renewables and how fast can we get through the planning system, I would say, what is the opportunity that we have here in Ireland with our 8 times more of a true map of Ireland, with 7 times the amount of land that we have on land versus at sea. And I'd say, okay, we've got this phenomenal amount of energy. Yeah. Let's do everything we can to bring that in, as opposed to looking at the other way and say, okay, here's the incremental piece that we can grow out, and then let's only take that much energy at that time. So that's the first thing I do. The second thing is I would make sure that this is a citizen-led transition. So I would really look at what is it that matters to people and how can we ensure that people are kept at the heart of the energy transition. Mm-hmm. So we're a country of farmers, we're a country of sports people, we're a country of people connected to the land. How can we use those pieces and create good quality, green, exciting jobs for the generations to come?
Catherine, thank you so much for joining us here today on KPMG's Energy Exchange podcast, where we discuss the practical things that we can do to unlock the full potential of Ireland as a major energy producer.